Alright, so you're looking at a 2010 Chevy Malibu. I'm going to go ahead and do brakes on this. This video is not really for somebody that works on cars all the time. This is more of a video. I gear these brake videos more towards people that are just going to try to do brakes on their own and save some money and maybe don't work on cars all the time. So it's a pretty basic, straightforward video. We're putting rotors and pads on this car in the front. I already did the passenger side, so I'm just going to do the driver's side here and show you pretty easy. It's very basic, but if you don't do brakes all the time, take your time and make sure you do it right, because it is your brakes and you don't want to be smashing into other people and stuff. So anyway, first thing you want to do is take your brake master cylinder cap loose. When you push the piston back on the caliper, it will push the fluid back into the master cylinder, and you don't want to have that tight and then push it back up in there. I mean, if you forget, it's not a huge deal, but anyway, just take it loose and get it jacked up, get a jack stand under it, and take the wheel off, and then I'll go ahead and we'll start taking this apart. Like I said, it's a pretty straightforward, basic video. If you've never done brakes before, I'll go over what tools that we're using and just the basic stuff on it. If you're not doing the rotor, then you can probably skip some of it. But this car's got like 130 something on it, and I think it's got the original rotors, and they're getting pretty wore out, so it's time to go ahead and change them. So we'll do that. If you don't change your rotors, it'd still be a good idea to take the rotor off and clean out the rust behind it. And I'll kind of go over that a little bit too once I get this off. So anyway, I'll go ahead and get it set up over there and get you down in the action, and we'll go ahead and start changing the brakes out in this car. Alright, so the first thing I'm going to do is just kind of turn the wheel outward so I can see what I'm doing. First thing we're going to do is pull this caliper off. I believe these are 15 millimeters on these Malibus. This air hose leaking. You got two bolts to hold this caliper on. They're in the back. You got one up here and one down here. And let's go ahead and get those off. Don't have to have electric ratchet, but it helps. So this is what I use to spin the caliper while I'm working on the rotor. This is you can get the brakes. You can get these at a auto parts store. It's just a brake hanger. But if you don't do brakes all the time, or you don't want to invest in this, a bungee cord will work, or a piece of rope, string, whatever. Just go ahead and pull your caliper off, and then I just hook it into the middle here. And then I hang it off the coil spring, and that's so you don't put a lot of pressure on your hose here. You don't want it hanging off the hose. So next step is we're going to take this bracket off here, and I believe those are 15 millimeter as well. Now it helps if you have an impact wrench, but it's not totally necessary. You can just use a regular ratchet. On these are not too tight. On these Malibus, GMs back here. Some of the trucks and stuff can be pretty tight, but these aren't too bad. For using an impact, you might have to use an extension for the top one. The strut kind of gets in the way. Alright. Now, I already took the brake pads off. But what I want to show you here is these slides. You want to make sure that these move back and forth freely. If they don't move back and forth freely, you're going to have to get that fixed. Either what will happen is your brake pads will wear unevenly. Probably the inner one will wear much faster than the outer one usually. And if you put them back on without getting these loosened up, you know, you'll have the same thing happen to your new pads. So these just pull out, kind of hold on to the boot, and just pull them out. And what you want to do is clean those up, and we'll put some grease on these so that they'll move back and forth. Now, if yours are seized up, I've had pretty good luck. Like say this one's seized up. I've had pretty good luck heating it up with a small torch down here and getting it hot. But you want to keep it away from your boot, obviously, because if your boot burns up, you know, then you got to look at replacing that. So keep it away from the boot. Just heat it up. I've had pretty good luck just putting this in a vise, heating it up way back here, and then take a pair of vice grips or whatever and just start working it back and forth. And a lot of times they'll come out. Now sometimes they'll break off in there, or they just won't come out. Then you may have to buy this entire caliper bracket here. Most auto parts stores do sell these. They're not super expensive. And then if you do get them come out, and it's, you know, and your pins are real rusty, I usually buff them off. But if they're really bad, you can get replacement pins at the auto parts store too. Just replace them if they're super bad. And I've even had the bolt break off inside the pin on real rusty ones. And if that happens, again, go to the auto parts store and they'll sell you the pin and the bolt from most applications. I just had one on a Honda break off on me, just taking the caliper off, and the bolt that holds the caliper on broke off in this pin. And of course, auto parts store had the pins and the bolts, so it was no big deal. But that's just kind of going over the bracket here a little bit. So like I said before, I'm going to go ahead and clean these pins up. I'll probably put mine in, I got a buffer wheel. You can use a towel, whatever, get them cleaned up, and then we'll re-grease these, and you know, before we put them back in the hole here. Now, and the other thing too, I want to go over, if yours is seized up in there, and you manage to get it out, then you want to take some kind of brush and hook it to your electric drill, and try to clean out this hole the best you can, because there's going to be a lot of rust and stuff in there. And then I would soak it down with some kind of cleaner, and then wash it out as best you can. Again, it's your choice. If it's seized, you may want to just replace the whole bracket. I just kind of go case by case, depending on which customer it is and what they want done, and what their situation is, you know, as far as replacing these or not. If I can get away with not replacing them, I usually don't. But you may feel better if yours is real rusty and stuck in there, just to go ahead and replace it. So on GMs, Malibus, these rotors just slide off. And if you were going to reuse the rotor, I would recommend getting inside here and cleaning this surface up real good. Any kind of rust in here will can cause vibration in your steering wheel, especially getting off the highway or something. A lot of people think their rotors are warped coming off the highway, and it's actually just rust that's gotten in between here and your hub. And it doesn't take much. It can cause a vibration. So yeah, clean these. If you're going to reuse your rotors, go ahead and clean these off. Clean this off real good. Clean off your hub real good. I usually use a little wire brush hooked to my angle grinder, and I just kind of go over this and make sure it's nice and smooth. And like I said, on the Malibu, these just come off. Now, I did have an issue getting these rotors. There's two different kinds of rotors for a 2010 Malibu, and it's basically, from what I can tell, different lug pattern on the bigger rotor. It's like 4 5/8 or something like that, or 5. I don't remember exactly, but there is two different rotors for this year Malibu. So if you have a 2010 Malibu and you're not sure which rotor you have, and I don't know what the difference is. I think one's four-wheel ABS and one's two-wheel. I guess there's a performance model Malibu. I can't really think of 2010 a performance model, but I guess it does have one. But if you're not super sure on which one you have, just take your rotor off if you can and take it to the auto parts store with you, or measure from here to here, which is what I did, and you measure the lug, and that'll tell you. You know, I don't know about every auto parts store, but O'Reilly's has the lug pattern in there, and they can tell you which one it is. So anyway, enough of that. I'm going to go ahead and get the new rotor. Your new rotor will come in a box with a piece of plastic over it, and go ahead and take it out. Take the rotor out of the box, out of the plastic, and once you get it out, I'll just go ahead and show you real quick. There's no sense. All right, so here's the new rotor. I took it out of the bag in a box. And I don't know if the camera's picking it up, but there's like this oil on here. It's kind of a sticky oil. Hopefully it's picking it up. Anyway, you want to get that off before you install it on a car. So just take some brake clean and a towel or soap and water. It's totally fine too. I took class a long time ago with Ray Bestis, and they actually recommend, well, they did back then, soap and water instead of brake clean to clean off the oil. I don't know if that's changed since then, but I just use brake clean. It's been fine. So just get that coating off. It's on both sides. They put that on there to prevent this rotor from rusting while it's sitting on the shelf and transport and all that. And so anyway, I'm going to go ahead and do that. And I'm going to go ahead and clean up this hub just a little bit. I'm not going to go crazy on it because it's pretty clean. But I will clean it up just so that it's clean. You know, clean mating surface for the rotor. So I'm going to go clean up this rotor real quick, get all the goo off it. Alright, so this is what I use to clean off the mating area here on the hub. If you don't have something like this, you can use steel wool or just anything, knock the rust, any kind of loose rust off of this hub. I already went ahead and did that off camera because the compressor was kicking on. And I went ahead and cleaned that rotor off. So all you're going to do at that point is just slide this rotor back on. There's no screws or anything to hold it on. Some of the Hondas and stuff have screws, but this one doesn't. Now you're back to this. If your brake pads come with the new hardware here, then you can go ahead and take this off. And this is your brake hardware, is what the brake pads slide on. If they come with them, just go ahead and replace them. If they don't, maybe try to clean these up and grease them a little bit. I normally get in here with I have a real strong buffing wheel on my grinder. I normally get in here and clean up this surface real good, just so there's no rust or anything prohibiting the pads from sitting where they're supposed to sit. If you don't have that, then just do your best with cleaning them up. So I'm going to go do that real quick and put the pads on. I didn't show the pads. I don't know what to do. Okay. Here are the pads. See, they're pretty worn versus, you know, this is a new pad. You can see the thickness here, and this is what's left of this one. Very little. These do have brake wear indicators on them. They just snap on the actual pad, and those are right here. And all they do is just snap on the pad, and they should come with your new pads. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and clean up that caliper back like I said I was going to. And install the pads. You can install the pads before you put it back on the rotor and the steering hub here if you want to. It makes it a little bit easier than getting your head in there and trying to slide them on. Just make sure you put them on the right way, pad going towards the rotor, and you know, the right orientation. So I'm going to go ahead and clean this up. And also, this is the lube I use. I don't know what brand it is. I get it at the auto parts store. I get the big bottle because I do quite a bit of brakes. But it's just caliper grease. You probably can't read it. It's caliper grease and quiet. And you can get this at the auto parts store. If you're just doing brakes on your own car, they can sell little packets of it. I buy the big bottles because I do, you know, like I said, it brakes all the time. But get some of this, and you're going to want to use this to lube up your slides. So the slides that we cleaned up, you know, these slides that we cleaned up, you're going to want to put this stuff all over these slides, get them nice and lubed up, and then take the end of your pads here. You want to take and put a little bit where it rides on the new hardware, and that will make these pads go back and forth real easy. So anyway, I'm going to go get these ready, and then we'll start putting the caliper back on. Alright, so I got the new hardware on. Most of the Riley's organic or ceramic kits come with the new hardware. I'm not sure about the other auto parts stores. So that's all in there. I got them all lubed up. Both ends of the brake pad are lubed up. I have the wear indicator on the one inside pad, and they're all in here. And you know, kind of follow this curve here, and put the curved end of the pad down. You know, follow that, and then that's pretty much it. It's ready to go now. So I'm going to go ahead and put this up back where it belongs, and we'll start bolting everything back up. So you're going to just kind of push your caliper and get it lined up. It's the only downfall to putting the pads on first, so sometimes they'll try to fall off. Especially if stuff doesn't want to line up right. This one's doing alright. So go ahead and get the top one started, then we'll put the bottom one in. Just kind of push the rotor where it should be. If it's easier for you, you can put a couple of lug nuts back on it and kind of hold it where it needs to be. And then we'll go ahead and tighten those bolts down. Again, those are 15 mil. And I'm using a stubby impact, but you don't have to use that if you don't have it. That's 2 Ugga-Duggas. If you're not using the impact, just get them pretty tight. Definitely want them snug. So that's all you should need for those. And then I got to put my slides. I didn't put lube on my slides yet, so let me go get my grease. Alright, so I already got the other one lubed up and put in there, so you can just see, hopefully you can see, there's a bunch of grease on this. And all you're going to do is just slide it back in, and then make sure that your boot pops back on. You'll kind of hear the boot pop on. If it doesn't, just persuade it. So, like I said, the goal here is to make sure that these push in and out real easy. Both these do. So now we got to compress the piston and the caliper. Take an old brake pad, one that's already, the one that came off. Don't use a new one. And just set the brake pad in there. And I got one of these little cheap auto parts brake spreaders. These Malibus are single piston, so this is all you need. If you don't have one of these and don't want to buy one, you can use a big pair of channel locks if you're strong enough. Though you can usually compress them with that, or just a regular wood C-clamp that people use for wood and stuff will work as well. Just anything to now these tools just slide into the caliper and press against the old brake pad, and then that pushes against the piston. And these should compress pretty easily. If you're having a hard time, super hard time getting it to go back, then you either have a brake hose or a caliper problem. If it won't go back at all, then you're going to have to figure out which one it is. Lost my train of thought. But they should go back pretty easy. You shouldn't have to force it back super hard. If you do, then you have other problems. You need to address it. So this one went back. You wanted it all the way level with the hole here. So that gives you enough room, because obviously this will come out farther and farther the more your brake pads wear out. So you got to push it back in. And anyway, flip it back over. And at this point, you can put it back on your brakes. Now the Malibu has like these little slotted, these caliper pins have like flat slots on each end. You want those to where they'll line up with the caliper, and they'll screw all the way in. If they're not in the right spot, then you can have a gap between the caliper and the pin, and you don't want that. I'll kind of show you. But these have a special orientation. to line up. If you don't get it right, your caliper won't be seated right on there. So just put the two holes back in, or the two bolts back in the holes. And I don't know if you can see here, you want this slot, you want this pin to be all the way flush with your caliper here. If it's not, then this pin is turned and it's pushed out, and you'll see a gap between this pin and the caliper. You don't want that. You want this to be flush with the caliper, and just turn the pin until it becomes flush with it, and then you're good to go. So these are both flush. So I'm going to go ahead and tighten them back up. And you want these pretty tight. You don't want to put a big breaker bar on them or anything, but you don't want them coming loose while you're driving, so make sure they're very snug. And that's it. Now if you're just doing a pad slap and you're just going to throw pads on it to get through for whatever reason, and you don't want to take your rotor off or anything, then all you're basically going to be doing is taking these two bolts out, compressing the caliper, putting the new pads on, slapping this back on. You know, that's one, you can do that if you're trying to save money, you just want to get it back on the road. I would still recommend pulling this rotor off and cleaning behind the rotor and that hub and getting all the rust out of there besides just doing the pad slap. If you're not going to change the rotors, I would still do that. It's up to you how you want to, but normally if I don't change the rotors, I still pull this bracket off and get behind there and clean all that out and do all that. And regardless if you're doing a pad slap or not, make sure your pins are moving back and forth freely. Make sure you lube those up. Make sure you lube the new pads up, and you should be good for a couple, however many miles. So that's pretty much it. And then make sure that you check your reservoir, your brake master cylinder. It should be full, because you're going to push that fluid back, and if you've added fluid as your brake pads wore down, then it's actually going to push fluid out of that cap and probably make a little bit of a mess on your floor. If you haven't added fluid, then it's probably going to go back to almost where it should be level wise. So just check that and make sure your cap's tight, and then once you get your wheels back on, go ahead and pump your brakes up. Make sure you do that, otherwise you won't have a solid pedal when you first take off, because you can press that fluid back and the fluid has to go back where it belongs. So just make sure you give it a couple pumps before you take off, and once you feel the pedal become strong again, then you're ready to go. So that's pretty much it. Like I said, these videos are for beginners. This isn't rocket science or anything. This is just for people that maybe don't work on their cars and are trying to save some money, and or someone that's just learning or whatever. It's not, like I said, it's a basic video. It's not some major repair, but you can save a lot of money doing the brakes yourself, and almost anyone can do it with good hand tools, decent amount of hand tools, or basic set of hand tools. And the only thing, it is your brakes, so just take your time if you're not familiar with it, and make sure everything's right before you put your wheel back on. Take it for a spin, because bad things that happen if your brakes don't work right. So they're pretty easy to do on most cars, and it's pretty straightforward, but don't rush it, and take your time, make sure it's done right, because you don't want any accidents. So that's about it. I'm going to go ahead and put the wheels on, and I got a few other things I need to do to this car, so I need to get on it. Thanks for watching. Have a good day, and God bless you.